Ring ankle bells jingle with each step, the universe at her hands and feet. I want to touch her. She flies in my house in paintings with petals of orange blossom raining from the ceiling. With her bas-relief tattooed on my skin, I worry I've offended the deity. In my dreams, I cry out to her. I'm still learning as I copy myself in her image. To she who abides in the sea of milk, I try to churn my own for motherhood. I hope it worthy an offering for this nymph of clouds and waters.
Beautiful. I just love that. And the imagery is, I think, well, many of us probably have apsaras on our walls. And we'll go home and dream of them, but not the way you did. Although we'll try. I'm really delighted that Phloeun Prim is here. Where are you? There you are. Yes, let's give a big hand. Truly a global visionary and the executive director of Cambodian Living Arts and Living Arts International. And I would say a visionary for all of us in the world today. No pressure. But seriously, the work that he's been doing over these many years has been one of true connection and one of depth. And so we've asked him to start us off tonight with a kind of overview about Cambodia and then to situate some of the changes that have taken place and some of the work that he's been involved with. And Phloeun, please join us on stage.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Phloeun Prim. I just flew in, but not from Cambodia this morning, but really great to be all with you. We kind of have almost like a full house. Thank you for the Asia Society and Rachel for hosting us today. I think the idea about speaking and talking about the arts and looking and reflecting about Cambodian art scenes today and also kind of reflecting with the past also, we thought that this program is to share kind of the context of a country, which is Cambodia, a post-conflict country that went through horrible genocide 45 years ago, and where the arts had played such a major role. For me, it's really truly special because I've been back in Cambodia for 25 years. I was born in Cambodia during the genocide, grew up in Montreal, Canada, and then going back to work and to live in Cambodia for the past 25 years. So I can really speak from kind of what I've seen, and what I will share is I think what I've seen on the ground growing when 25 years ago, it was really kind of emergency situations where the arts and culture, mostly oral tradition, was about to disappear because a lot of these masters for generation to generation pass on their skills and their traditions, dance, music, ceremony, rituals. And what we've seen is over the last 2 decades is emerging out of that tragedy time is a whole new generations of young Cambodian artists aspiring for something new. Looking, I think, being connected with the world and not be in isolations as they've been during the wartime. And then looking today, as I look at the arts in Cambodia, I look at it as an ecosystem. I kind of like to model this as looking at the arts of Cambodia through a lens of the ecosystem. So you have the government and the Ministry of Culture, and mostly we're looking at the preservation aspect and the heritage. They've done tremendous work on the temples and the tangible heritage. And also on the intangible part, today there is a huge focus, I would say mostly around this idea of keeping the traditions and keeping and preserving it. So we, through the work of Cambodian Living Arts, worked on it 25 years ago. But the last, I would say, probably in the last 15 years, we've seen, as I said, like a young generation of artists through different art forms, music, dance, film, coming out on creating new things that are about Cambodia context today. I think also what we've seen is 20 years ago, a lot of NGO and non-for-profit, especially also international organizations and people going to Cambodia to support the revival of the traditional arts. But now today, since I would say 2008, 2010, some of these NGO had to stop operations, but the artists stayed and they needed to continue the work. So a lot of grassroots initiative emerged over the last decade. And we've seen, I would say, really interesting piece that tackles societal issue of diversity, environmental issue that are brought out through theater piece or dance piece. We'll share during the panel also a few clips that showcase also the work that have been done. So I think from the last 25 years of what we've seen is, I don't think that we can say that Cambodia have been fully successful on developing kind of the role of arts in the whole society. But what I can say is that we've seen really interesting directions and new things that had evolved, festivals, grassroots organizations, as I mentioned, and then also a few of these talent also being presented abroad, elsewhere, where young filmmakers have won numerous prizes in film festivals, and more recently, a Cambodian rap songs have hit more than 100 million views online on YouTube. And so I think that's kind of the good news of looking at the perspective of Cambodia and looking at what had been done. So more about my work and the organizations that I've been working with. It's Cambodian Living Arts. We, again, I think so myself, as I've returned 25 years ago, Cambodian Living Arts started also 25 years ago. So I can feel like the story of this organization that I've been involved is somehow my own story. And I know also I want to kind of shout out to the Cambodian diaspora community that are from the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens that are here tonight. Many of them, like me, I think we've been returning to Cambodia to find our own identity through the arts. And so I think the story that I can see, that have been able to express through my work with Cambodian Living Arts is something that I feel deeply passionate. So I'll share a quick video about the work of Cambodian Living Arts, and then we'll continue this conversation with the panel.
Khmer Amata គឺជាអង្គការមួយដែលតែងតែទទួលស្គាល់នៃការបញ្ចេញមតិតាមរយៈសិល្បៈនិងវប្បធម៌ដែលមានសារៈសំខាន់ដើម្បីអនាគតរបស់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាយើងជឿថាសិល្បៈគឺជាបេះដូងនៃភាពរស់រវើកនិងសន្តិភាពរបស់សង្គមជាតិយើងបានចាប់ផ្ដើមការងារតាំងពីឆ្នាំ 1998 ក្នុងគណៈបេដាស្ថាបនិករបស់យើងគឺលោកអានចនផនបានវិលត្រឡប់មកប្រទេសកម្ពុជាវិញបន្ទាប់ពីបានជម្លៀសខ្លួនទៅស្នាក់នៅក្នុងប្រទេសអាមេរិកសិល្បៈដែលបានជួយសង្គ្រោះលោកក្នុងសម័យប្រល័យពូជសាសន៍ខ្មែរក្រហមបានធ្លាក់ក្នុងស្ថានភាពគ្រោះថ្នាក់បំផុតដោយការបាត់បង់និងភាពក្រីក្ររបស់គ្រូព្រឹទ្ធាចារ្យសិល្បករដែលនៅរស់រានមានជីវិតក្នុងរយៈពេលមួយទសវត្សរ៍ដំបូងយើងបានធ្វើការការពារនិងស្ដារឡើងវិញនូវសិល្បៈទស្សនីយភាពតាមបែបប្រពៃណីខ្មែរ តន្ត្រីចម្រៀងរបាំនិងល្ខោនជាដើមដែលស្ថិតនៅក្នុងស្ថានភាពជិតនឹងបាត់បង់យើងបានផ្គត់ផ្គង់ដល់គ្រូព្រឹទ្ធាចារ្យសិល្បករនិងបង្កើតថ្នាក់បង្រៀនសិល្បៈដើម្បីឲ្យពួកគាត់បានផ្ទេរជំនាញនិងចំណេះដឹងទៅដល់សិស្សក្នុងតំបន់របស់ពួកគាត់នៅជុំវិញប្រទេសទាំងមូលខណៈពេលដែលស្ថានភាពនៃប្រទេសកម្ពុជាបានផ្លាស់ប្ដូរហើយសិល្បៈខ្មែរមានការរីកចម្រើនប្រសើរឡើងយើងក៏បានអភិវឌ្ឍខ្លួនឯងដែររួមជាមួយនឹងការបន្តផ្គត់ផ្គង់ដល់គ្រូព្រឹទ្ធាចារ្យសិល្បៈយើងត្រូវធ្វើការជាមួយនឹងយុវជនជំនាន់ថ្មីយុវសាស្ត្របានកើនឡើងហើយត្រូវការចំណូលពីមុខរបរសិល្បៈនេះយើងក៏បានចាប់ផ្ដើមផ្ដល់អាហារូបករណ៍និងបង្កើតការសម្ដែងព្រមទាំងប្រារព្ធមហោស្រពផ្សេងៗដល់សិល្បករដែលអាចរកចំណូលគ្រប់គ្រាន់ដើម្បីបន្តការចូលរួមរបស់ពួកគាត់នៅក្នុងវិស័យសិល្បៈសិល្បករគឺជាអ្នកដែលធ្វើឲ្យសិល្បៈនិងវប្បធម៌មានការរីកចម្រើននិងផ្ដល់អត្ថន័យដល់សង្គមកម្ពុជាតួនាទីរបស់យើងមានការវិវត្តជាថ្មីម្ដងទៀតហើយយើងធ្វើការដើម្បីផ្ដល់ឱកាសបទពិសោធន៍និងបំផុសគំនិតទៅដល់សិល្បករគឺមានន័យថាពួកគាត់អាចធ្វើដំណើរបង្កើតការងារថ្មីនិងចាប់ផ្ដើមគម្រោងដោយខ្លួនឯងយើងចង់ជំរុញឲ្យយុវជនរក្សាទំនាក់ទំនងទៅនឹងបេតិកភណ្ឌវប្បធម៌កម្ពុជានិងបង្ហាញទស្សនៈរបស់ខ្លួនតាមរយៈសិល្បៈចាប់តាំងពីឆ្នាំ2017មកយើងធ្វើការជាមួយក្រសួងអប់រំដើម្បីកសាងសិល្បៈនិងវប្បធម៌ទៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីសិក្សាជាតិកម្ពុជាសិល្បករត្រូវការឱកាសនិងសុវត្ថិភាពដូច្នេះការងារស្នូលរបស់យើងនាពេលបច្ចុប្បន្នគឺការផ្ដល់មូលនិធិផ្សេងៗមូលនិធិដំឡើងស្នាដៃថ្មីការធ្វើការជាមួយនឹងសិល្បករនិងក្រុមសិល្បៈដើម្បីបង្កើតឱកាសរបស់ពួកគេសម្រាប់ថ្ងៃអនាគតសម្លេងសិល្បករមានតួនាទីចែករំលែករឿងរ៉ាវដែលត្រូវបានគេមើលរំលងនិងបង្ហាញពីក្តីព្រួយបារម្ភដែលគ្មានគេនិយាយដល់និងបង្កើតឲ្យមានឱកាសសម្រាប់ភាពរីកចម្រើនការងាររបស់យើងជាកត្តាជំរុញវិស័យសិល្បៈដ៏រស់រវើករបស់ប្រទេសកម្ពុជាពិតជាមានសារៈសំខាន់ជាងពេលណាៗទាំងអស់
So I think it's not hard to see why I'm inspired every day in the work that we are doing, working with 3 generations of artists. You know, those who survived the Khmer Rouge and were able to do the transmissions of these art forms. The middle generations that are our teacher that really kind of foster kind of the new creativity, and then having the young emerging artists expressing and creating new work more recently. So it's been for me like just a reward, and I think this is something that you can see through the lens of the work that we have done. So we will continue with the panel conversations, and we've crafted a really great group of people who have been involved here in New York with Cambodian arts, and then also re-inviting also Cambodian artist poet Svay Sokunthary also to be on the board on stage. But first, I'd like to invite Elena Park, who I've worked. Pardon? Yeah, Elena Park, who I've worked with for over more than a decade, and really instrumental to do the Season of Cambodia Festival in New York City. Elena?
Well, Hi, Phloeun. I can't believe you got off the plane and this is what you do like 3 hours later. I think we should just dive right in. So I wanted to invite Joe and Sokunthary to join me on stage. I wanted to say, though, thank you to Rachel Cooper and the Asia Society. As you probably know, if you know anything about Asian arts and culture and the political and social importance of everything Asia Society does here. They were an anchor partner in the festival 10 years ago, made a lot of things possible, presented programs, panels. And so I think the interesting thing about having Rachel Cooper here and Joe Melillo is that they kind of are they're like tastemakers, but they inform us because they decide what gets a platform in New York City, and therefore it's a megaphone into the world. And Joe and I work together at Brooklyn Academy of Music, as I did with Karen Hopkins, who you're going to hear from later. So it's a pleasure to be on the stage with you. And, you know, it's wonderful that both of you took refuge, so to speak, in countries outside of Cambodia, and then today are instrumental in moving things forward in Cambodian arts and culture in your own way. Sokunthary, in addition to being a poet and an artist, is also a scholar, so can add her perspective to the conversation. And Phloeun, you have a taste of already. After we have some conversation, we're going to open it up to questions. So we'd love to hear, particularly for people from the Cambodian community, thoughts you want to share or questions that you have for the panel. But just going back to, Phloeun, you wanted to start this conversation in kind of the late 1990s, early 2000s, when Arn Chornpan, the founder of Cambodian Living Arts, was on the ground, and you said it was an emergency situation. Can you talk more about what was happening on the ground there and what he was passionate about doing when he went back to Cambodia?
When we begin the work of Cambodian Living Arts, in fact, Arn's vision, he came from a family of artists, and in fact, he survived the Khmer Rouge by learning music. And during the Khmer Rouge, they targeted intellectual and artists, but they kept few artist group for the propaganda songs that the regime created. But also in the case of Arn, he would tell about the orchestra, that the traditional orchestra was playing to hide the killing that was going on during that time. So Arn's vision was always to come back to his country, 20 years after, to give back dignity to master so that they can teach the next generations. So it began by identifying art form that no one was much interested, that only handful of master or teacher still holds. And we begin by a master at a time, a community at a time, set up the classes under the roof of these masters, just allowing them to get back that dignity to be able to teach, because many of them hid their knowledge, because during the Khmer Rouge you couldn't say, and after the Khmer Rouge neither they did dare to say that they were artists. And then simply making, I think, the magic of oral traditions, which is people-to-people transmissions and learning from the master in his own traditional way. And it's how everything began, in fact.
Having spent time with Arn, and if you've met him, he's one of the most beautiful human beings I think I've ever met. And to survive as a child soldier and as a musician, he had to do things as a kid that he feels guilty about, but he just needed to survive. And I know that the people took him under his wing, the musicians in secret would teach him some of the songs that were banned, so that in addition to playing the propaganda songs that the military demanded, he was also being infused really with tradition and culture. So one of the things that amazed me was how you had mentioned in the earlier meeting today, you all knew, and two of the three co-founders of CLA, John Burt and Charlie Todd, are here with us, that one of the things that the master teachers needed was security. Can you talk about what they committed to right away to be able to give them what they needed so the traditions could survive? Yeah,
I think often Arn, our founder, speak about dignity. I used that term before. For him, we needed to provide them just that space so that they can do what they do best, which is really kind of that transmission of those oral traditions. So what the organization did through kind of the commitment that Arn had for these masters is to commit for lifetime for their well-being, their healthcare, until they are going to kind of the next life. So we've committed that from the beginning. We had about 20 master artists that we worked sadly, over the last 25 years, the majority of them pass away, but we still carry kind of that legacy of support to the master for a lifelong time.
There's a beautiful documentary that I think Point of View did, where you see Arn recounting his story and also going desperately trying to find the people he knew from before the genocide to be able to identify them and give them resources. And amazing, like people had to, of course, pretend like they weren't artists. So someone was like, "What do you do?" And he said, "I cut hair." And so then, a row of soldiers came up and the guy had to pretend like he was a hair cutter. But there were remarkable stories of survival. And if you get a chance to watch it, I think it's still available online. It's a beautiful piece. Yeah. Well, if we kind of fast forward to where Joe enters, and you enter the picture. When I first met Phloeun, he was a board member, and CLA was actively trying to entice him to run the organization because Phloeun was this incredible creative entrepreneur who was championing kind of Khmer arts and crafts. And then you got enticed to run the organization, and then soon thereafter put together something that was probably unimaginable. Can you talk about what the organization was like when you got there, and why Season of Cambodia?
Well, one of the things, there was a remarkable first decade of work to preserve and transmit those oral traditions that Cambodian Living Arts set up in these communities across the country. And my thought when I came as kind of the country director at that time of Cambodian Living Arts was to think, well, we cannot just multiply. We would never find the funding to multiply the number of community that we are supported. So the only way to do it is to really build the leadership and community leadership for the younger generation to take on the sustainability of these arts group. So. Then I was thinking that, more often, and I think, again, I can relate to the diaspora community here, is still today Cambodia is looked at through the lens of the genocide and the Khmer Rouge. So how can we overcome, or how can we change the narrative about a country? And I often speak even with friends, artists in Afghanistan, when will there be not a mention of the kind of like looking at the Taliban when we think about Afghanistan? So in the same way, the Khmer Rouge will still be kind of what identified the history of Cambodia. So to do so, I was kind of starting to imagine this, with, in fact, meeting with you, Elena, and others, to say, well, can we find a place in the world, and here we are in New York, to present Cambodian story, but through a different narrative. So a narrative where, artists had kind of come out of a genocide or as a post-conflict country, but are able to create work that speaks about that history, but also that is forward-looking about where they want to take that story. So we start thinking about ways of course, the first thing you have to think is how we will fund it and find the funding to create that kind of project. And then who would be the first kind of partner anchor organization that will believe in that missions and visions, and why would Cambodia be on the world stage or in New York stage more important than the other? So the narrative was built around a post-conflict country that was coming out of a tragedy and that want to tell a different story.
And there had been a lot of funding into Cambodia by that time I'm more familiar with the American ones, but also French organizations that knew the desperate need and were putting money into it. Before we talk about the programming side, Darren Walker was key to this when he was at Rockefeller, and then when he moved to Ford. Ann Bass, who sadly we lost a few months ago, was also a key person, and then John Burt also co-chaired this kind of celebration. But can you talk about what the funding picture was and what the awareness was for the need?
Well, because we normally it would be a New York organization who would find the funding that would then, let's say, pick up what they feel interesting in Cambodia and would have the funding. But because we really wanted the narrative to come from Cambodia and lead it, so we had to find the first seed funding to make it happen. So one of the first seed funding was coming from the Asia Cultural Council, which was a small grant of $10,000 to provide us ways to support some presenter from New York to go and experience Cambodia. So that allowed us to invite, in fact, at that time, Joe Melillo, at that time executive producer of BAM, which, in fact, I didn't know much about BAM, neither of Joe, because I didn't know much about New York at that time also. So I was just coming to New York and starting to meet people. And so we invited these presenters to come to Cambodia, and Joe was the first. It was really surreal because the setting. Imagine thinking about the Royal Ballet of Cambodia, but in a school that is at that time 30 minutes away from the center of Phnom Penh. No infrastructure. These dancers were not wearing any costume. They were just on rehearsal kind of uniform, but it's like it's simple dresses and shirts. And then at that time, I remember Joe, after the presentation, because in fact we tried to present the Royal Ballet at the palace, the Royal Palace of Cambodia, but we didn't succeed to get the authorization to present the Royal Ballet, so then we can impress our foreign dignitary coming to Cambodia from the arts. So we had to go into that school, and I guess I think something really attracted Joe's eyes in seeing this ancient art form being performed in front of him. And I clearly remember just right after the lunch, he said,
okay, we're going to let Joe tell this part of the story. But can you talk about the royal connection about the princess?
So the Royal Ballet of Cambodia is a form of classical dance of Cambodia, but the term Royal Ballet have always been led by somebody from the royal family. In this case, the Royal Ballet of Cambodia used to be led by Princess Bopadevi, who is the daughter of King Sihanouk, who have been kind of the first dancer since the 60s, in fact, recreating and creating the first Apsara dance of Cambodia. And she carried, leading kind of over the years, this troupe that we call the Royal Ballet of Cambodia.
Okay, Joe, before we get to your story of Phnom Penh, what did you know about the arts and culture of Cambodia? Because I know you had to be, throughout your career, really discriminating about what got your stage and any funding, because you have to be so picky because the world comes to you and says, present my show, present my artists. What did you know?
Okay, hello. Basically, it all begins with a colleague who's no longer with us, Sam Miller from Massachusetts, was the colleague who actually surfaced the concept of Cambodia. So it's curators look for ideas, information in doing their curatorial work, and so it was my role as an executive producer with my partner, professional partner, Karen Brooks Hopkins, who you'll meet after this discussion. Our tenure was where we agreed that we wanted a global and local cultural institution that was what we wanted to build. And so knowing this is the background, which is important, because ultimately we, because that's the important pronoun, believed in service, and that we were servicing the institution that employed us, but most importantly, we were servicing New York City. not just Brooklyn, but New York City. And so my curiosity was piqued. So that, I mean, curatorial process begins with an idea. And so the idea had been planted by this colleague. And so it all unfolded. And then the most important and very critical reality was traveling to Cambodia on a curatorial mission with Elena and Phloeun. The three of us had a full, solid week of immersion into the art and culture of Cambodia. That's where it all begins.
And as Phloeun was saying, they were in their rehearsal clothes, and they presented an excerpt of something.
Correct. An excerpt. No, they did an excerpt of narrative, story, dance of the Royal Khmer Ballet, the tradition. Okay, and you heard and you've seen. The reality is about how the reconstruction, the putting together of the survivors, and then the middle ground being the teachers who learned from those who did survive, the mistresses and the masters, and then the next generation. And it all got revealed. And again, I'm not a novice programmer, so that you live on your imagination, but most importantly, on your instinct. And so I didn't need to see the costumes. And bottom line, the reality of the costumes that the women wore at the Brooklyn Academy of Music's Opera House, they were sewn into those individual costumes. So try to get your mind around a very traditional art form that had been reconstructed, and where these young women actually had a group of seamstresses sewing them into their costumes. So the other fact about the Karen and Joe tenure is we knew that we needed to create cultural destinations, that you create an event and they will come. And they did come. But the other part of this was it provided us the opportunity to work with the local Cambodian community on this project, which was so gratifying because a whole new population of New Yorkers discovered BAM.
And because you mentioned cultural destination, I just have to have Phloeun comment on two photos. This is from 1973. What can you tell us about that photo?
Well, this was during the Cambodian Republic. So the time of this photo historically is very important because King Sihanouk was destitute and a republic was created by Prince Irimatak and Lon Nol. And these dancers were coming to the U.S. on a tour to build kind of a relationship, diplomatic relationship between Cambodia and the U.S. in a time where we were like Civil War was still going on, Vietnam War was still going on, and here these amazing dancers, few of them only survive, are still there that I know of, that were part of this troupe. So that's 1972.
Do you want to cue up tell me the next photo, and then I'll hit the button?
Yes, and so, in fact, when we did the research about the festival, the season of Cambodia, we discovered this photo among archives, and when I spoke with the Royal Ballet troupe and I showed them, they said, "Oh, we'd love to recreate that iconic photo again." So then the result was, in 2013, we were able to recreate the picture with the dancer of the Royal Ballet on Times Square.
And you can see the costumes that Joe is referencing. Can you talk a little bit about this, and then we're going to bring Sok into this conversation?
Yes, among the kind of the program that we wanted to bring, one of the kind of oldest art form of Cambodia is called the shadow puppetry. Only 2 troupes still exist in Siem Reap. This one is from Wat Bo. It's called the Wat Rechebo dance. This work of the shadow puppet have been recreated by Venerable Pinsan, which is the master monk at that pagoda in Siem Reap called Wat Bo. And for him, his childhood, he remember seeing the shadow puppetry. And his idea was really to bring it back. So he, with the support of Cambodian Living Arts, almost 20 years ago, in fact, we've helped him finding puppets and instruments and build a troupe. So we were able to bring the shadow puppets of Cambodia at the atrium of the World Financial Center on the basis of where the tower were. And the producer idea was that because normally this form is played 7 nights, 7 days, and it's the whole Ramayana story that is recount through those performances, and it's in the village setting. So we didn't want to bring it to a proscenium stage in New York City, and we tried to locate kind of one place that would be interested to present and to commission the piece. So you see it was under the palm tree of the atrium, and the setting was also mats on the ground in the same way you would see this performance in Siem Reap in the village.
And this happened to be a performance that Sok saw. So I'm just going to play this clip of Kong Nai, one of the great master teachers, with Ben Allison here at the Asia Society. So you were in the audience for that, you told me.
Yeah, I was there with my partner and our child, who was about 5 at the time. And I think there was like there's an opportunity for all the children to come up and sit with the master and their parents. And that was really, I think I just found a photo of that. I just found a bunch of photos from our time at the festival, the Season of Cambodia Festival. It was really quite magical.
And you told me how important the festival was for you as a Cambodian.
Oh, sure. I mean, excuse me, allergies.
There's water to your left too, if you need it.
As someone who as someone who was born in the camps and resettled here in the Bronx, it was. We don't have nearly as large of a community as some other parts of the United States, like Lowell, Massachusetts, or Long Beach, California, which have the first, the second, and the first, respectively, largest populations of Cambodians in the United States. So for us to actually have, in this cultural center that is New York City, and to have Cambodia suddenly be at the forefront of this, it felt like this wonderful secret almost that was ours, that was suddenly being shared, and so it felt very personal, suddenly becoming quite public. And I mean, for me, it was like there was a certain kind of thing that I wanted to retain, because I didn't want the authenticity of our culture and the way that it was being put out there to be compromised in any kind of way. But I mean, there really wasn't any concern once I went to the events. For example, like there was the opening at the Rubin, I think, and actually I forgot until this moment that I actually saw Master Kong Nai twice, because I went to see him at the New School, where they actually had like a jazz event with him and jazz musicians, and there was even a Q&A at the end, and I really wanted to ask like what he thought of opera. As someone who writes operas, and so to see him again on the big stage, it was like in some ways, I think, representative of the way that Cambodian Living Arts works in a very like local, a local way, and retaining the dignity, but also the skills of the masters and passing on. And also being on the stage of Asia Society was literally a being on the world stage for everybody to see him. So that was kind of magical to have it go from like a learning institution to one that was like a larger, world institution.
Open this way.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to add also, in fact, you see Master Kong Nai here, and I mentioned a song that hit more than 100 million views. So the singer named Vanda is kind of the kind of rap singer of Cambodia right now, the top kind of singer that everyone did. And it's a song that called Time to Rise, and it was produced by, in fact, a Cambodian American musicians, Laura Mam and her production, who produced this, and it's Kong Nai and Vanda singing together, and that had been kind of the biggest hit of a music coming out of Cambodia to hit kind of YouTube channel, which is really interesting.
And for good reason. I mean, it's an excellent, first, the production of the video and the music itself is quite excellent, but also he is truly, Vanda is truly such a poet. Vanda, totally recommend you look him up. But also I think what is so beautiful, and it's something I'm going to be discussing in my dissertation, and that is like the way that you have, I think if anything, that video and that collaboration is indicative of the kind of evolution that is happening in Cambodian arts. You have the masters, and you have them there revering them, but also having someone who's of a younger generation, who's like literally, even the placement of the master with Vanda, he is the master's place on a podium is higher, and they're like sitting at the steps and putting the master at the top, and kind of honoring that, but also talking about like modern things, and even like the beginning opening up with the master singing. Suddenly, when Vanda comes in, it shifts to a different musical key, doing the same kind of musical effect. And so you see in some ways it's like, the passing of the torch, literally in the video and in the song.
Well, one of the things that when Sok and I were talking before, talking about preservation and moving into more modern expressions, and this is a sculpture of Sophia Pick. His gallerist Tyler is here somewhere, Rollins, and I think it was a beautiful kind of embodiment of contemporary work that people had not seen before. And he had a solo show at the Met Museum that was toward the tail end of the festival. You mentioned your dissertation, so can you tell us a little bit about what it is you're focused on?
Well, the proposal still needs to be approved, but we're just going to say dissertation now. And it's going to be, I'm actually at the Graduate Center doing my PhD in English, but I don't, fortunately our program allows us to kind of dip into other disciplines. So it's not just English. I go into cultural studies, sound studies, music, as someone with a classical music background in flute and in singing. So I'm looking at, obviously, like you and me, it's like, has some kind of personal essence to it. So for me, I've been following for a very long time, probably the same amount of time as you've been working at CLA, just the evolution of Cambodian diasporic cultural production, but particularly the U.S. diaspora, which is obviously where I'm based, and because I'm in literature and in writing, it tends to be in English. But I guess there's a different set of questions and context as Cambodian artists in this country, and also even like with the Cambodians in Europe, there are artists over there as well. And I mean, do I want to get into that?
Sure, I think let's go there.
I wrote so many notes, but we were talking about preservation and heritage aspect of what your organization is doing, and. If you will, I want to start because a lot of what I'm going to say is in response and referencing what you both had said. First, the term, when you hear the term Cambodia, what do you think of? And that's really kind of the starting place, I think, for a lot of us who, are not related to Cambodia or not Cambodians. But even for us, as those who are of Cambodian heritage, we're always wondering, like, how can we move away from the Khmer Rouge, And I think there was something that Joe, you had said, like, I didn't need to see the costumes in order to, like, imagine and to have those ideas. If you will, for the diasporic community, because we were not in the U.S., we couldn't see the outfits. We could not imagine them unless we were of like the survivors of the older, like my parents' generation, who could actually remember the outfits. So a lot of the work that diasporic artists end up doing becomes involved, caught up in memory and nostalgia. So, I have like a whole list of artists, which I'm sort of not going to go into right now. But so I think there's a combination of commemoration. There's definitely the preservation part, but that's only one aspect of it. There's commemoration as well, a transnational commemoration, and then I think some kind of like innovation, which is also what's happening with the things that are commissioning and the dancers that you have, the younger dancers who are like making a new way for themselves. I think dance is the more prominent on account of it being visual, but. Over here, because I'm working in English, not in Khmer, because I'm not literate in that. We are, for us, because we are the diaspora, and in the U.S. we have access to European art forms, to other diasporas, and as a result of that kind of like juxtaposition, adjacency, it ends up becoming more nuanced and quite complex in a way that it wouldn't be if we were just in Cambodia. So you have like, I guess what I would want to call like transmutation of the arts and hybridity. And that's really what I'm interested in thinking about, because like I have no business talking about Cambodian arts in Cambodia. Like there are people doing that work like you're on the ground, and I want to talk about what it is that I know. But also I think, the concept of Cambodian is changing as well. You talked about the 90s, like 25 years ago, you were saying like there was an emergency situation. I totally get that, because like when I was starting out as a writer, I was in college and thinking like we're like kind of in triage, trying to figure out like how can we move beyond the dichotomy of the Khmer Rouge or Angkor Wat. I mean, those were really like the books that you would find, and then the literature that was out there was all like what I call survival memoirs. Lots of Cambodian survival memoirs, because like I think like in some ways that feeds into this need to create a narrative that ends up in America where everything is amazing. Suddenly, so there's like a particular kind of direction and migration of a story. But for me, I was interested in, as we, 10 years after that, I was like, okay, now we're moving away from the survival memoirs, and maybe we could have the Khmer Rouge and that time just be a backdrop as we begin to talk about newer narratives, more nuanced narratives. Like for example, now that the generation from 25 years ago is growing up, we have a lot more like queer narratives, for example, which is like super exciting. So so for me, like I'm wondering what the large question was like, what happens in the absence of a generation of artists and intellectuals, right? Except the context is the U.S. So what then? And what do we create in that absence? And what kind of, is it distortion? Is there, what does it end up looking like? Because the masters, we only have a few of the masters over here. And in that emergency situation is also like the masters were dying off. And it's like we have to nurture and get what we can out of it. And the truth is, arts and money is linked, to survival. So, yeah. Sorry, I just went on a bit.
No, that was great. Do you mind if I, in the interest of time, skip the traditional dance and just show the contemporary piece? Because I think it'd be interesting to show something more recent. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm skipping that. We can show it to you if you didn't see. Can you tell us about that? I love that we are on a program where we can talk about the Royal Ballet and then very, very contemporary, exciting work.
This is a Chun Visna, is a young Cambodian dancer. All the dancers that you will see performing on stage in Cambodia come from a classical trained kind of, in fact, training that they've. So all of them first explore dance through classical folk dance or the ballet itself. But there is a generation of young artists that had kind of, you know, come from a classical trained kind of, in fact, training that they've. So all of them first explore dance through classical folk dance or the ballet itself. But there is a generation of young artists that had kind of, you know, come from a classical trained kind of, in fact, training that they've. So all of them first explore dance through classical folk dance or the ballet itself. But there is a generation of young artists that came out of exploring contemporary movement. So Chun Vesna is one of them. As you can see, this piece is called Dark. We've commissioned the piece 2 years ago on a cultural season called around the notion of identity. It was identity, them and us. So we asked them to explore, a piece that they felt relevant, and Vesna really created this piece around his own kind of issue as a minority in Cambodia, and these are kind of I know there are also other dancers, which I forgot now his name, from who was from the U.S. also, and he also have a troupe, a dance troupe. Prom Sodom, yeah, Prom Sodom. So Vesna is really kind of part of this generations of young artists exploring something completely different in terms of repertory, in terms of thematic, and so. Yeah.
And we have Sophie Lynn Chim Sapiro's group, Amrita, that did a lot of beautiful work with our colleague Fred Fromberg and a lot of people in Cambodia who have done all this preparatory work and then supporting artists and the cultural sector. We do want to open it up to you for questions, but I just wanted to ask you about the current work that CLA is doing, because I know it started very grassroots, but it's grown into something very global, connecting people and artists and countries, and especially within Asia.
Yeah, because, I think the fact that we work in restoring identity and culture. About a decade ago, there was also a big shift in terms of the way I think the government also perceive arts and culture and use kind of culture as a rhetoric for galvanizing nationalism and nationalistic feeling. We were quite concerned that our artists that we work with could also go toward kind of that tendency of thinking, oh, we revive these ancient traditions. And there's a big race in Cambodia geopolitically around the intangible cultural heritage of UNESCO. And who has the first to inscribe this form as a Cambodian art form, or as a Thai art form, or as a Vietnamese art form? And that was a big concern that we had as an organizations. So the way we thought to kind of open up the horizon of our artists is to take them to neighboring country. So we started to bring our artists to Myanmar, to Thailand, to Vietnam, to Laos. And while we were traveling, amazingly, for the Cambodian artists, it was an eyes-opening. But also for the host artists in the country, they said, oh, we would love to have that kind of exchanges in a Cambodian Living Arts, a Lao Living Arts, or something like that. So this is what it led us to set up a sister organization to Cambodian Living Arts called the Mekong Cultural Hub. And the missions of the Mekong Cultural Hub is to create regional exchanges and in the area of arts and social action, because the Mekong region and the other country doesn't necessarily have the historical weight of Cambodia in terms of post-conflict, but has other issue like in Laos and Vietnam and Thailand about the Mekong River and the sustainable issue, displacement with the Myanmar artists, political issue and threat with the Thai artists. So Mekong Culture Hub is really toward really getting artists that are interested in regional work, but also targeted, in fact, talking about social actions in the region.
And you're also cultivating something called Living Arts International.
Yes, and more recently, because our root from Cambodia and working in the region, we see kind of more connection within the global south, and this is something that we see as something from our own work, but also that start to define the need within other artists and arts organizations in the Global South, in Africa, and in the Middle East, and in other places in the world. So we're just kind of launching and initiating a kind of a Global South program also.
Well, it's beautiful to hear all the things that CLA has been doing in 25 years. We wanted to open it up for comments or questions. I mean, you have people who represent such different parts of the story and the evolving narrative. So Rachel is there with the trusty mic. If you want to raise your hand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That's been beautiful so far, Phloeun. So 10 years ago, when we first met, it was that season of Cambodia here in New York. And I always had this vision that it wouldn't be a once-in-a-lifetime festival, that you would come back every 10 years. You would go to BAM again. You would go to the Joyce again. Joe, I'm Steve Pesner from the Joyce. Yes, and, you know, bring not only the old culture, but the modern culture of Cambodia to Americans, whether of Asian descent or not. Is there any likelihood that you're going to try that again so that somebody like Peace can once again play around?
Well, the things with Season of Cambodia is not that at that time, 10 years ago, and Joe referred to the work that have been done previously by other arts organizations, not only Cambodian Living Arts, by Emeritus Performing Arts, by Ray Hume and other. So the result, why we were able to pull Season of Cambodia, it was because of the groundwork that had been done 10, 15 years before Season of Cambodia. So that's how we were able to bring 125 artists to New York City, 34 arts venue partner, and doing all kinds of things. Not that the repertoire of arts has been all used for Season of Cambodia, but when we reflected back on the ground in Cambodia, one of the things we realized is that we needed to keep investing in the grassroots level for the next generations of artists that should be emerging in that. So the work that you see of Vesna is, I would say, just at the beginning of him exploring contemporary dance. So I don't think it's about a timeline, but it's more about when a new generation will emerge that will have I hate that term, international ready work, but it's not about being ready for international stage. It's being ready itself artistically about what they want to express. And I think we didn't want, I think then our investment was not about creating a big event, but about investing in the continuity on kind of the next generation that are emerging. So out of it, I hope that Vesna will have in the next few years something at the Joyce Theater or other at BAM and so on. So I think our work was really to create that narrative through Season of Cambodia, but then an ongoing outcome coming out of Cambodia. That's what I would say.
You're investing in the process.
Yes.
Versus the performance of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm talking to you more. I'm more interested in also the Cambodian diasporic work that's happening here. And Phloeun also will tell you later about how you can go to Cambodia and have a cultural immersion, which will be satisfying, although not the same. One of my great memories is Sophie Lynn's troupe at the Joyce. That was such a memorable piece.
Bend in the River. Yes,
Bend in the River, which also had sculpture by Sophie up, I think. Another question? In the back. Yeah. And if you can tell us your name, that would be great, too.
Well, hi, my name is Anaim. And so I was so lucky to be here during the Season of Cambodia, and it's just so wonderful to remember all of those times. I'm curious what pandemic-era innovations you've been able to leverage to scale out the work that you're doing, like using Zoom to continue teaching the work of the masters?
Very good questions. In fact, we one of the new grant that had emerged during the pandemic is in fact, it's a multimedia. We've granted artists to create multimedia piece that can use, in fact, the virtual world. Interestingly, the work that had come out, I think, still need work, because they thought that by just filming themselves doing a performance is kind of a virtual or multimedia work. And in fact, I thought that they would explore. So we realized that they didn't have enough exposure to understand also kind of what kind of work that can come out using technology to do so. So the next round will be also to find mentor in the region that can help work with Cambodian artists to come out with through these grants that we are providing.
Can I suggest something? I was there was a lot of I got a lot of commissions for writing and various things during the pandemic as well, and obviously because of the circumstances, a lot of it had to be done online. But I recall I had a commission to do a video for issue project. It was like a film essay. So I'm thinking about doing recordings so that they're not just a recording of a performance, having them perhaps team up with people who are visual artists, and particularly people who have editing skills and filmmakers, in order to create something like that is like really, truly a combination and innovative, rather than just a music video of somebody performing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's what happened.
Okay.
Another question from the audience?
Well, actually, I have one, which has to do with that interface between the international, the venues, as you were talking about, as curators, and the work that's coming from Cambodia or from the Mekong region. And one of my concerns is that it feels like some of the international exchanges have been very slow to come back. And how can we encourage and help develop the ability for those exchanges to continue and flourish? Because I'm quite concerned that the idea that the technology will be enough and we'll just send you a video, but there is no substitute in my mind of the people-to-people exchange. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
And Joe, it would be great for you to hear from you on that as well.
Oh, no, I'm probably the radical up here. The issue affecting cultural exchange between other cultures other than our own fundamentally has to do with money. Nothing less than money. And the foundation community of this culture were established in order to solve problems within our society, and they've walked away from the globalist identity of the foundation of this culture. American culture, which is less than 300 years old, is about immigration. And so we have a culture that is demonizing refugees and immigration. That's our reality today. And in art and culture, you'll hear my professional partner in life, Karen Hopkins, talk eloquently about the foundation community is not interested in cultural exchange. So the money's been taken off the table for us as programmers to find the financial resources to continue the vitality of discovering other cultures. Excuse me.
You're the radical. Yes.
I'm joining your party.
Yeah. Well, for us, one of the priority. We did the season of Cambodia, and we brought many artists, and we put a lot of resources to do that. But also, it's to look to kind of regional exchanges and Asia to Asia exchange also. So it's one of our key priorities. We've launched a mobility grant for artists in Cambodia to do exchanges within the Southeast Asia. So we're looking also of much more because, in fact, what Joe is saying also is if we've seen the reality that big institutions in the West can afford bringing Asian artists to perform or to exchange, but within Asia, a Laotian artist would not have the fun to do something with a Cambodian artist or a Thai artist. And that's why we created the Mekong Cultural Hub, is really to create more of these exchanges within our own region. And so...
Well, I would love to talk to all of you more, but I think we have to start to wrap up this part of the program. I just wanted to say that it's great to look around the room and see people I haven't seen in 10 years who were instrumental either in organizing the Season of Cambodia or funders or people who were part of the partners and community. Joe, your service has been long and distinguished, so I just have to say thank you. And Phloeun, all of the work that you're doing that has galvanizing effects, catalytic effects throughout the world is great. And so I know later we're going to hear a poem from yours. I just want to say that you mention in the poem children who compose your motherland fabric. And I think it's just a beautiful sentiment that you have your roots and then you carry them forward and create work, opera, poetry, and everything that we can experience. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'd like to invite, thank you, Elena and Sokunthary and Joe. Because we talked about the evolution of the arts in Cambodia, really more recently I had the pleasure to host and to welcome former president of BAM, Karen Books Hopkins, who just recently went to Cambodia and met with many of these artists, and I thought that that could be a really nice way to hear, what she's seen and how she perceived as someone who was based here for a long time, traveling with the launch of her book to Cambodia and see what you think about the art scene in Cambodia.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here, and obviously I'm always happy to hear Joe talking about BAM and all of you talking about the great things that happened during the Season of Cambodia Festival. It was such an amazing event, and I believe that these kind of citywide festivals that connect people and neighborhoods and move people all over to see something and discover it in a deep way is something that we should try to do as much as possible in New York and in every city in the world, rather than staying unto ourselves, that we do things together. So there I was on this book tour, and I was trying to, go out into the world. My goal was to go out and have a great adventure, meet a lot of people, and talk about, at first I thought it was to talk about BAM. But then when I got out there, I realized it was to try to be a champion for the arts. And then I wanted to push myself to go beyond the usual places. And so I thought of Cambodia. Now that was an amazing experience that we had in Season of Cambodia. And I bet that there are some very interesting young managers and artists that I would like to talk to and would be interested in hearing from me. So I wrote to Phloeun and said, what about a book event in Cambodia? And he immediately wrote back and said, yes, come and we'll put the whole thing together. And I would like to say that of all the places I went, I think that Cambodia was the most extraordinary. And I did 35 stops on this book tour, so there was a lot of running around. And the thing that was so incredible, first I was so surprised by the attendance at a book talk to talk about arts administration. It's not exactly a hot topic in the world of in the world, and yet so many people came and had questions. And just sitting up here tonight, like hearing managers, arts managers such as Elena and Rachel and Joe and myself and you, gives me such great appreciation for the work that we do on behalf of artists and on behalf of bringing them together in a global context. So Cambodia was sort of remarkable. The experience of I got the publisher to deeply discount the books, so and we worked this out so that everybody would have access if they wanted one. And there was so much enthusiasm to talk about these topics, not just the work, but how to make it happen. So it was thrilling to be in this setting and have a great full house of people to talk to. But then came the next part, which was exploring the artistic scene in Cambodia. And that was also remarkable. Going into not only Siem Reap and seeing the temples, but into Battambang and seeing and meeting artists who were creating like work on the street, work in houses, work in all different kinds of formats, and realizing just how significant it is for artists to be able to create everywhere. And I was particularly excited. I see that Charlie is here somewhere. I was particularly excited that we had the opportunity to take a boat to a wooden house kind of in the middle of nowhere off the coast of Phnom Penh and experience a traditional Cambodian meal prepared by Chef Nak, who is a writer of cookbooks, and her husband, who had remade a traditional Cambodian wooden house. So the whole experience of the food, of the house, of the way the food was served, of that was an artistic experience too. So I realized that art was being created in every way for people to experience when they come to this country where people are so hospitable and open-hearted and interested in connecting with people that are that are people who are visitors. So that was a very long answer. And the whole experience was actually amazing and kind of mind-blowing in terms of being an American and going into a country like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. I think really speaks about kind of like what people can experience, and we are inviting people. In fact, those who've been to Cambodia, those who haven't been, we have information about coming to Cambodia next November on a cultural delegation trip. So please, you can look on our website. But
I want to say something too about what I think Cambodian artists need, because obviously. Joe mentioned the lack of funding, which is, the perennial problem always is not artists, it's getting their work out into the world. And Cambodia needs investment and philanthropy to support its art sector. And this is needed in terms of more space and better quality space for artists to do their work. And then just more opportunities for the work to be seen and for the work to be presented and for there to be circumstances, sound, lights, and so forth. In every way, I believe that this is a culture that deserves support and deserves investment. I am disappointed that the government, with everything that they've done to help revive the culture, has not really invested in quality theaters and giving artists a chance to present, because I think it will generate more tourism. And when you bring tourism and you bring tourist dollars, then you also bring philanthropists. And so that is my hope for the future of the arts sector there and in the region.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Maybe I think both of us, I think it's we're at the end of the program. Rachel said we begin with an artistic piece, and we will close now with a beautiful artistic piece from Sokunthary again.
This poem is called Don't Let Your Heritage Be Past Tense. think of your great-grandmother in woven silk, countless threads through her hands weaving lines, intersecting her face and palms, her children who compose your motherland fabric. Songsters of Cambodia's golden age, blare from past decades in static, singing across time through a rusty accordion. We have numerous words for eat: see, nyam, hope, chan, bisa. Each bite is love. Ye asks if you are hungry because it took 30 years to say I love you, like an American. You imagine a future not yet past of grandfather's garden in Georgia, untended in the southern red clay, where fruit trees have taken root. Someday, you will taste dragon fruit on par with his on the streets of Phnom Penh. Ba's face is bright when he sees you enjoy its flesh, studded with seeds. He says, I wish I could be here when the apple trees bloom. Thank you so much.